I'd like to call Falmouth Planning Board meeting of April 26, 2016 to order. The first item on the agenda is minutes of April 12th. Do you have anything on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the minutes of April 12th. There are two sections, the executive session as well as the regular session. I recommend approval of both.
So we've got to hold the executive still?
Well, we can approve them, we just don't release them.
Okay, just not approve and not release?
Approve but not release the executive session, and the comments made by Mr. Brown have been incorporated.
Okay.
That's my question. Thanks.
Second.
Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Unanimous. The next item on the agenda is a decision, the applicant Falmouth Youth Hockey site plan review to allow addition of 2,878 square feet to the ice arena located at 9 Technology Drive, Falmouth Engineering, filed March 10th. Bob, would you read the decision?
Sure thing. April 26, 2016 draft. Motion that the planning board vote to approve the application of the Falmouth Youth Hockey League, Inc. under Article 39, site plan review of the zoning bylaw for a plan entitled Site Plan Showing Proposed Addition for Lot 10 Technology Park Drive, prepared for Falmouth Youth Hockey in Falmouth, prepared by Falmouth Engineering, dated January 8th, scale 1 inch equals 40 feet, with the following findings and conditions. Findings. The planning board held a public meeting on April 12, 2016 to review the application for modification of a site plan review decision dated February 9, 2011, issued to Falmouth Youth Hockey League, Inc. under Section 240.191 at sec of the zoning bylaws of the town of Falmouth, which approved construction of a new ice arena located at 9 Technology Park Drive, Lot 10, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, shown in the Falmouth Assessors Map 15, Section 04, Parcel 015D, Lot 010A. The modification is to allow an addition of 2,878 square feet to the ice arena building at the subject property. The addition will require a net reduction in parking spaces in order to expand the footprint of the building. The board found that the net reduction in parking from 320 to 299 spaces will not create any parking issues, as there is ample parking at the site. The applicant has addressed the issue raised by the town engineer in his referral dated April 12, 2016. The board finds the addition to be minor in nature and does not disturb the board's previous decision in any significant way. Conditions. 1. The plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes shall be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary. Pursuant to Section 240.183B of the zoning bylaw, no permit for full or partial occupancy shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of this approval have been met.
Second that motion.
Scrivener's error, Mr. Chairman. After the words dated January 8th, you should insert the year 2016.
Oh, okay.
And I guess it's understood that the no occupancy is only for the addition, that the hockey rink can continue to be used?
Correct.
Okay, just to make that clear.
Okay.
Anybody else?
No comment.
Do I hear a motion?
You got the
A motion?
been
Oh, second?
Yeah.
Seconded.
No, all discussion, we're all set? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Unanimous. Approved. Thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is another discussion, planning board discussion. Applicant Irene G. Rodriguez, preliminary plan consisting of 28.8 acres of land to be subdivided into 7 lots with 24 multifamily dwelling units located at 0 and 375 Sandwich Road, Holmes and McGrath. For the applicant? got it, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record,
Revised?
We have,
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, Mr.
Are
Maderos
you
has left the
excused
room.
or recused?
I had it.
Yeah.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a civil engineer and professional land surveyor. I work for Falmouth and McGrath. I filed a request to extend the decision deadline till May 26th in order to cooperate with the planning board. The second thing, I have submitted a letter that describes the project, and I'd like to go through it quickly with a PowerPoint. We have revised the plan. Oh, yeah. Am I doing the, is this the right one?
That's just the pointer.
This is just a pointer.
No, there's a, is that the right one?
Oh, sorry. The red's the dot. They're all different. Thank you.
Don't point at any planes.
I-
going by.
I have a lot of fun with electronics, computers, etc. This is the colored graphic of the revised plan. There's a letter that goes with it. I put up a hard copy so that when I refer to the next couple of slides, you can look at it. So I wrote a letter and I listed the major revisions. There's some other revisions, but across the street on Sandwich Road, we show the location of Pinewood Lane. That's right in here. We add the pavement. The town engineer wanted to see the pavement and the curves. It's within the recharge area at Great Pond. The zoning bylaw describes two areas that require mitigation of nitrogen. It appears the project is not in the area of either stabilization or high-quality areas, as the zoning bylaw defines those areas as south of 28. We'll ask for a waiver of the regulation that says the road length can be no greater than 500 feet. We're going to also ask for a waiver of, in the front section, we have shallow curves and we don't have 100 feet between them. The town engineer points out that we need a waiver. We're going to ask for this. We're showing an emergency access connecting to the existing gravel roadway inside the Commonwealth electric easement. When I talked to the town about, when I talked to the family about showing a connection here, they said they've had a lot of trouble with dirt bikes. If you've been out there, there's actually an area here, and there's some trails that go through there, and they've had a significant problem with trespassers. So they would ask that the emergency access be constructed in a different way than what was described in one of the staff reports. We now show to the east that there are certain there's two planned residential developments and there's some open space further. Let me go back to this one. What I'm saying is that we now show that this is a planned residential development at Harris Hill Road. There's a second planned residential development in here, and then at the end of Meredith Drive, there's a small subdivision that shows some open space here. The point of this is that the bylaw suggests that planned residential developments ought to connect to other open space. So by showing that, we have done that. We've enclosed a grid subdivision that shows that we have the right density. I'm sorry I couldn't preview those, but it's very hard to make out those numbers, but it's 24 units. And so we have proven that, as required by the bylaw, that we can get 24 units by a grid. We didn't count this particular...
Mike, could you use the microphone?
You need to pick up the mic, they're not hearing you at
Or
home.
just point it better, the guy just came in.
Oh, sorry about that. The town requires, the zoning bylaw requires that we prove that we can get the same density in a grid subdivision. We did not count a parcel in here because we didn't think it met one of the requirements of the bylaw. So we have proven it. We have added a sidewalk to the plan in that along, now, it's very hard to see it because of the coloring, but there's a sidewalk that starts up in here and goes all the way around. That's Lot 3, and that's 4 units. I don't know what happened to that.
It's on ours here.
It's there, it's on here.
It's on there.
It's on there, but that's supposed to be a
Invisible.
scanned version of this, so, like I say, I love PowerPoint. Now, one of the town engineers said we had to seek the permit from the Commonwealth Electric Company which is now Eversource. Eversource says we can only file when we have detailed engineering plans. We will get a permit to cross the Commonwealth Electric Company easement. The project is not within areas designated as wildlife corridors in the zoning bylaw, and it's not within any areas mapped as habitat for any rare and endangered species. So this is a copy of the original plan we filed, just so that you can see it. The board has seen that. The public might not remember what it looked like. So the bottom line is we have, like I said, increased this to 50 feet. The open space then is slightly bigger. Was 18-something acres, so we've increased it. As I said, we did some minor things that we talked about. So I believe that we've answered most of the issues that were raised, and we would ask the planning board to consider the revisions and issue preliminary approval. It's understood that preliminary approval it's the dialogue, it continues the dialogue between the owners and the town, and is an indication that at least the town at this level finds that this is a suitable development for this land. Are there any questions I can answer from the planning board?
Ralph?
Yes, Mr. McGrath, the emergency access, you say you will file to get permission to cross the power line, but where will it lead to?
Right now, you can drive up and down the power line, and what I'm saying is, we also need to get permission from Electric to do this road construction. There is buried in the ground a ground wire, so that if lightning strikes these posts, the excess charge goes into the ground wire. So you have to be very careful when you construct any crossings to make sure that the ground wire, the integrity of the ground wire is preserved. So I need a permit no matter what.
So coming in from Sandwich Road, for emergency access, you would turn down there and then in that way, okay. And that's less than 500 feet?
No.
It's not, okay.
I will have to look at the plan.
Okay, that's all right. If you tell me it's not, that's okay, I understand. Okay. That's just providing emergency access.
It's about 640 feet roughly from this point out to.
Okay, so it's your emergency access because you're over 500 feet.
Well, no matter what, I think.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
With this amount of density.
Thanks.
Yes, Doug?
I appreciate that you've increased the buffer there, that's good. But I was wondering, do you think you might be able to squeeze 75 feet there?
No.
No?
The reason I say that so quickly is that the family does not really want to develop this. So what I've done is I've taken a generic plan of a building, and so these lots are designed with that generic building. And I had a very difficult time on this side with that generic building, getting the septic and the generic building and the parking all on the lot on this side. So I can't squeeze it anymore.
If the whole thing shifted a little bit to the north? The reason I say that is because you've got the sand pit or whatever it is that's over there. So any wildlife that wanted to migrate on that side would be able to. But on the other side, it's kind of tight.
I tried to put the road so that it was more or less in the middle of the site, so I would consider it. What the planning board has got an aerial photograph that shows this is a mined-out sand pit.
Right.
So the planning board has that for the benefit of the public. So there's a mined-out sand pit there. To me, 50 feet is a sufficient width based on my long experience.
Okay, just asking.
Bob?
I kind of took a little different tact. As far as I'm concerned, there should have been a moratorium after 1986, after I finished my house. So I understand neighbors' concerns and all that, but I was looking at this today and looking at all the lots that are abutting it and thinking, what if back then we had cluster design developments, residential developments? How much open space would there be altogether? So I appreciate the fact that you increase the border there to 50 feet from 25. I think this is a very workable design. It conserves a lot of space. I think wildlife still have enough habitat there. I know in my neighborhood we've had a snapping turtle that's been 30 years. This turtle has gone through the neighborhood. We got deer all over the place. If you want deer, you plant hosta. They're sure to come. So I think it addresses a lot of the concerns from the neighbors. When we get into more specifics with the definitive plan, we can talk about lighting and things like that. But as far as the setbacks and the road length and all that, I'm satisfied with it.
Everybody else done?
Yep.
I had two questions, Mike. When you first started, I guess the first thing that you read about the waiver, I didn't quite understand what you said right in the beginning. Something about the curbs of the turn, the engineering department had a question? I didn't understand that.
You have a subdivision regulation that says that in between a curve that goes to the right and a curve that goes to the left, there has to be 100 feet.
100 feet separation.
So what happens in this area right here, we have moved the pavement over, so it's 60 feet here. And what they're saying is there should be a 100-foot straight section there. I don't think it's necessary because this is flat land, it's open, we're not going to have real sharp curves. So the simplest thing is just
I
to put a
understand
waiver
now.
in.
I
Then
know-
rather have a short curve, 100 feet straight and then another short curve. I'd rather have it flowing and sweeping.
Now I understand. I just didn't understand what you said. Now I do. And then the other thing is on the grid plan, on the 24 lots, you didn't show the 100-foot circle.
But I can add them, but the lots are all, I forget, the back line is it's
We're
always
just
like
used to seeing the
140
100-foot circle on all the plans. The last couple ones we've seen it. So I guess we could look at the dimensions and say it could fit, but can't you just show it on the plan anyway?
Yeah, I'd be happy to show.
Thank you. Those are my only two questions. Anybody else? So you want to keep this open, right? We don't have you're not looking for a decision tonight?
Right, I gave you an extension
Right.
because I assume Brian needs to listen to you and write something.
One more thing.
Go ahead, Doug.
Is it possible that you meant to say May 24th? That's a Tuesday. 26th is Thursday.
I always give you a couple days so you
Okay.
can write the decision and file it with the town clerk.
Okay, good.
So there's a method to my madness.
Good.
So you could vote to accept the extension at the request of the applicant, which would be good.
Okay, I'll move that we accept the extension from the applicant.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
Do you want any further public comment, or?
Oh, right.
Yes, any more public comment on this? Yes.
Marjorie Parmenter, in a butter, 36 Meredith. I have a neighbor, Fran Chivarli, who sent a communication to the planning board to be read tonight. Did anyone receive that communication?
This is a signed letter, ma'am?
Yes, it came, I don't know if it came through mail or email, but she is in a butter at 40 Meredith Drive.
There's an email, Mr. Chairman, unsigned, for the record, if you want to read it.
No?
No?
Do you want to express your concerns?
Yes.
Don't want them to read it, just tell her the gist of the whole thing. We really just want to understand what she's,
Well,
she
there-
really should sign them and send them in, but go ahead.
They agree with the plans that it be a dead end and not a through street. They appreciate the plans include the open space. They look forward to that. Their understanding is minimize impact on noise and light. They are concerned that they're asking for 100 feet clearance corridor, and why the cluster is not just stretched back, elongated. And along those lines, I have the same question. And she applauds the developer for showing concern for the people. She really would like to see 100, she's asking generally, the thrust of her question is a 100-foot corridor on this side. That would catapult the whole strength of that drawing that way. Okay, that's just a gist of it. It's a lot longer, but you said not to read it.
Okay, that's fine, I think we understand that.
And her name is Frances Chevarley, and she is at 40 Meredith Drive. I can show you where that is.
We can see it.
Okay, great. I have a question about the road. Why is it curved? He said, I know we have to limit the road, we have to get permission to make it this long, but if the road were stretched out more, that would change the perimeter of the lot, all 6 of them, and allow it to go back that way and still allow for a wider corridor. 75 feet, for example. So the other question I have is in the total acreage, when was the last time that this plot was surveyed? Was it surveyed years ago? Was it recently surveyed? Will there be a new land survey to confirm the extant markers or to remark boundaries? I'm wondering if it's 28.8 acres initially, or maybe it's 30. And if it's so close to 30, I was wondering if it's over 30, doesn't that subject it to a review by another committee for environmental impact? That's my question for
Well,
whoever.
our plans show that it isn't, so that's a hypothetical question. I think they will have to provide a survey when they do it.
They will redo the whole parcel for acreage?
They need to provide a survey.
Okay. So that's current.
Anybody else?
Yes.
No, step right up.
I'll be quick because I understand that we do have this extension. Tanya Lewandowski, 363 Sandwich Road. I'm the one with a little farm. Very concerned about the type of impact that's going to affect me. I bought agricultural land 20 years ago to be in an agricultural environment. I know it would probably be very difficult for me to put my farm next to a condo development, so I would like to actually kind of talk about this a bit. I'm concerned about the number of homes here. I know that's still up for discussion. The type of traffic and the level of pollution, and I mean everything from light to everything else. I think the concern about actually, to be honest, the curve there is due to actually there are wetland delineations there because there are lady slipper, box turtles, very indicator species that actually do exist there. Don't want to close this as an opening down, just kind of being very transparent, and I think we all should be. don't know why we couldn't have openings to the other end. I wanted a little more kind of dialogue on that, like why Sandwich Road always has to be kind of, I can't even walk across my road. I had to take my mailbox in. I can't pull my horse trailer in my property anymore because it is insane. They raised the traffic speed limit now to 40, and we all know everybody does more than that when they're driving down that road, and it just gets a little dangerous, and I'm concerned. I've seen kids almost getting hit by cars and everything else at the bus stops. But these are just additional small things, not small to me, but other issues that probably have to be considered. What I had to do to get my horse barn and the permitting process, my fly mitigation and manure removal program, and everything was documented, was far more intensive. I'm really kind of surprised. It's the first time I've ever kind of lived through this process. It seems to be a little bit kind of less intense on the preliminary level than I would have expected. And perhaps that's just an awakening for me and an educational type of situation. But just wanted to pull out some of those as ideas or concerns. I have spoken to 14 different residents, and there's actually about 20 to 30 that are actually signing a petition currently of concern, not to want to stop anything, but just of concern. Within 5 days, nobody has this time. I know I kind of have this crazy thing called the job during the day, so I have to attend that as a researcher during most hours. But just want to kind of put that off as to kind of consider, you know, my other neighbor, I've never met you before, I'm sorry, other than the last meeting, you know, elongating, maybe kind of tweaking a couple of things. Please do consider the number of houses there. Again, this is Falmouth. I mean, this is agricultural Falmouth, or it was, and it's losing that kind of beauty that brought me here, to be honest with you. And I'm a little concerned with that population density that we're creating, and just to kind of think about that through this whole process. I'd be appreciative of that. That's all. So.
Could you point out where your house is,
Yes.
or your farm is in relation to
Yes, I
this?
can. I'll hit the laser. No, but nobody's eyes. I'm right here. Like, that's where my horse barn is, I would say. Well, actually, right here. My apologies. Right there, because Jim owns, Mr. O'Hare owns this piece of property here. And I have one of those, you know, the pork chop lots, how they took, this used to be an old cattle farm, or cow farm for dairy. And there's an old farmhouse that was here, and there's another farmhouse here. Miss Louise Socrates owns this spot, about a half-acre lot. And then Mr. O'Hare owns this. I'm right here. So I'm concerned because I have problems. I really applaud the efforts with this motorcycle situation. Really like that. I've had kids come and harass my animals, horses, shoot chickens. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I'm just concerned about this type of, again, this pressure that's kind of, you know, coming in on that. 50 feet to a horse, it's not doing anything. You know, that's not a buffer. So I'm just concerned the motorcycles, the loudness. You know, kids walking to school, they want to see an animal. That's fine, but I'm just concerned about that. But this is the area that I'm kind of located here. It's very small, kind of just I'll call it a gentle lady's farm, it's not a gentleman's farm. But that's where we are. Bees, horses, chickens, ducks, all that crazy stuff.
Excuse me.
And I run hunting dogs too. So
do all-terrain vehicles go down the
oh, it's
the
crazy.
power line?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be actually the power lines actually used to be kind of a positive. I used to board horses years ago on Jigette Road, and I used to be able to ride my horse from Jigette Road all the way, and I used to go through Dunkin' Donuts before it was, you know, before we even had like a four-way intersection with lights and all that crazy stuff, but I used to be able to take my horse and ride all the way through the drive-through on a horse. So that was obviously on the other side of the road. And then I have this side of the road, and I used to ride in the backs, but now it's been cut up. For obviously, because there's impact, there's different new developments, there's the pit, all those type of things. And that's, you know, in some ways I don't mind it being cut up just because of the motorcycles. They really are quite a problem. And we've had a couple of police reports. There's a few people that spray painted things on another neighbor. She owns a couple of acres down in this area, this spot right here, and Ms. King, and she's had a lot of vandalism. And like I said, I've had the same problem. I've had people throwing rocks at my horse and things like that, and I don't really appreciate that. Like kind of that quiet area that it used to be, that little hole off the Sandwich Road that nobody could find because that 50 feet of frontage. But it's just a concern. It's just that population density, and that's going to be a heck of an impact from having deer, turkeys, and lady slippers, and there are wetlands back there. I'm sorry, but I used to do delineation on a federal level, and they really are some wetlands back there. Not anything that would probably, because of the 30-acre clause here, that may inhibit it, and I still wouldn't want to stop them from selling. I mean, I'm actually quite friendly with those neighbors as well. We want to see some sort of movement for Falmouth. I understand they want to develop it. I wish that our 300, our wildlife club would want to buy that type of land just to leave it as an open space, but, monies are of course tough to come by, I understand that. So, because it is pretty unique. If you've ever been able to go back there, it's actually kind of a unique area, because you look at different forest structure that actually does change with time, and it really is what Cape Cod is, and you don't see as many of those darn Norwegian maples that have infiltrated even my property. They're trying to, I still have one of like the last clusters of real locusts and a couple of pitch pines and things, and I try to do natural landscapes, and it's kind of nice to see some of that actually exist there. Not when I'm getting run over by an ATV, or people are doing illegal dumps back there because they have access now through the Tanglewood area, and it's kind of turned into a dump. And unfortunately, people love to throw all sorts of trash back there. But again, you can't ask every single town employee to be standing guard at the end of the power lines, and very realistic individuals. So those are some of the problems, and I know a lot of the concerns of my neighbors is really the impact of the amount of people that would be there, as much as I know that there have been some efforts to kind of reconstruct the layout. Maybe an elongated plan would be nicer for the folks that live on the southern, well actually, yeah, the southern side of that piece of property, also as a wildlife corridor. I'm concerned too, when you have a road that's 1,300 feet long, all of this area is no longer wildlife. You can call it open space, you can call it whatever you want. It's not a corridor. By definition, it's not a corridor anymore. That power line is a corridor because there is no impact on either side. And there's a certain type of space that's relegated to actually be defined as that, depending upon species too. I mean, there's some animals, I worked with trying to look at some of the areas in Otis and also at Crane. Francis, she gave the huge, beautiful pieces of properties there, and they're opening some things, and they're doing things for different species that need huge open areas. The type of animals that you have in that area that actually go through, they're fine with cover. That's fine. But when you close that by putting a road right across it, it's another person's yard, and especially if you deforest it. So if you denude that area and turn it into a lawn, it's space that is open, but it's not open space, if you will, for the wildlife purpose. I guess that's what I should say.
One of the things we take into consideration
Sure.
when they're doing this, this is a 24-lot subdivision that they could put in 24 houses and all have their lots.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to talk about a cluster
Sure.
that puts them all together, that saves more open space. And so one of the things we take in consideration, which is better, a cluster like this, or lots right next to you and all the other houses, like they showed on that one plan. And that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I
agree.
The cluster, we feel, generally is an advantage to have more open space.
And I haven't fought that one iota. I'm still concerned about the pressure and of the amount of.
I think it's a lot less pressure than the 24 lots would be.
Well, I think it would be very difficult to get 24 sellable lots in there versus something like this. I mean, come on, we all know what would sell in that area. That would sell far more because it's a nicer community to live in. I would want to live in a cluster area like that has open space around it, as opposed to, another, you got your 1 acre. So absolute, I'm not blind to that whatsoever. These are just, small things, but just throwing it out there that it's been said. I'm not against, again, I've said that on the first meeting, I'm not against developing I mean, people have the right to sell their land and to build homes. I mean, that's, that's
Okay,
why
thank
I'm
you.
in this country.
And something else that we look at too is trying to minimize the amount of pavement in an area
Yes,
too,
because
which
yeah,
cluster developments also. And
Absolutely.
as far as elongating it, then you're elongating the pavement as well. I think,
maybe.
he can't put it any closer to the west end of the lot because of the easement for the power lines.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think this is,
We got to balance everything
yeah,
out.
Right.
it's a balance.
Is it even a possibility that the exit could have been closer to where the road is on the, I'm just asking, just out there in the blue, on the east end, as opposed to having again, another Sandwich Road exit? Why did the cluster has to develop, I mean, it's just a small.
Mr. McGrath, you
Was
want
it
to answer
Davis? I
that?
can't remember the name of the road now. Harrison.
The family does not own rights in Harris Hill Road. Harris Hill Road is right there, and the only way we could tie into it if it was a public road. And then the other issue the planning board would have is that is already over 500 foot long, so we'd be
Elongating it.
elongating it, so.
Well, if you don't have the rights, you don't have the rights.
I guess that was my biggest question. I appreciate the answer, because actually you would have a far less of an impact on, if you're talking about coverage, because the road would be far shorter going from here to here versus this. So that was just a
But it's a
question.
private road.
Right, that was a question.
That's a good answer. It kind of makes that a point. They don't have the rights to do it. Yes, would you have another question? Please do.
I wanted to chime in with Tanya's comment about the dirt bikes. It is absolutely outrageous. And I think because of the blocking that the upstream neighbors have been doing, this spring I'm having a daily occurrence between 36 and 40 Meredith Drive through private property of commuter dirt bike juveniles every day. I've made police reports. So halfway down, almost a third down Meredith now, they are cutting through people's property just to get to those woods. It is a huge problem, and I'm hoping that when this development comes, that there will be bylaws absolutely clamping down on the use of dirt bikes. I haven't seen many ATVs, but the dirt bikes are huge. Thank you.
In the back, you,
Hi, my name is Mary Marshall Sylvia. My father built a home that would be an abutter to lot number 2 since 1968. Last time I was watching on TV, and there were many speakers that were talking about Meredith and that there's not much impact over on Pitch Pine Lane. But we would be impacted the most out of everybody on Pitch Pine Lane, number 39. So I was putting together a map trying to figure out how close in proximity it would be to our property. And someone had spoke about last week 25 feet or 50 feet buffer. I know we're coming up to like a piece of pie from the Pitch Pine Lane side where the power lines are. The first few houses before mine has a wider sweep, and then it kind of goes very narrow where I would be the closest to the cul-de-sac number 2. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, it's showing a 50-foot setback.
It is there, 50?
Yeah, they changed, that's what they said, that they increased it.
Yeah.
From last
Okay.
time, they made it 50 feet.
All right, so
And
one of the things
also-
why, what's that?
And also, the corner of your property is right where the beginning of the buildings turn. So you've got the 50 feet plus it starts to come back. See how 2 has, turns back towards the road there? That's where your property intersects it.
I don't know what you mean.
Can you use the pointer, the thing, to point out what you're talking about?
This is your property here, so this is, the majority of your property is an even more buffer.
Probably add just 75.
That's what we were trying to figure out, if the property would be a little bit past my backyard, or is it going to land side by side? So that's what was hard to figure out.
Yeah, it looks like one corner is 50 feet, and then it gets wider as along the back of your property.
And there's a rear setback of 10 feet, so the structures would actually be at the minimum of 60 feet
Yeah.
away from anybody, which is a pretty
So-
big setback. In a normal neighborhood, if there were single-family homes, the houses would be 10 feet from your property line.
Yeah, this is a nice corner piece lot that we've lived on our whole life, and, we went through a lot when the mining went on with Mr. DuPont's property, and we had Barolotti cutting through. We have like one road that's called the Road to Nowhere, because if you go past, to the left of the house, there's a gate, and that's where the big hole is, like almost like a giant crater. We've had that happen, when we've had to fight for the Barolotti business coming through Pitch Pine Lane, which is a very narrow, I don't know if it's a
Is
private
that
road or
on
not.
this plan we're talking about, or is that the property next door? I'm confused.
That's
door, that's where it says
on the
open
other
space.
side of my house.
All right, so it's not on this plan that we're looking at?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure what you were talking about. We got to keep our comments,
Yeah,
on this
so
plan.
I'm just giving you the idea
I
how
just
my
don't want
house
to
is.
get confused.
Yeah, that's just how the house is situated. So then, there was some talk about an emergency road, and I was wondering if that's going to be going just at skimming the bottom of my property, because the power lines.
We have plenty of these. Would you like to take one of these? It's everything's marked, you can take it home with you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we all, they delivered extras, so we have lots of them.
Before you go off the plan. This is the emergency section, it is the power lines. And so this is your property here. So it kind of goes in skirts. So you still have this section here behind your property. So it wouldn't be going up against your property and be going over.
Because I know right where that is,
Well, this
Well, it's
doesn't
for
exist.
fires and whatnot.
well, where the power lines is right
Yeah,
now.
Well, the
well,
power lines are
power
here.
lines are here.
Oh,
Okay,
Yeah.
this is the proposed emergency road, right here.
That's in the event the main road's closed in case of a fire and they have to get in another way. It's like
Yeah.
a fire used for
Yeah.
emergencies only.
would the emergency road be like access for everyday use for the development?
Mr. McGrath, why don't you describe it?
I guess my concern is there going to be a lot
I
of
don't know. He's
traffic
gonna
going
tell
up
us.
Pitch Pine Lane? That's what I was wondering.
He's going to tell us.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
The emergency access that we've done at other places is an all-weather type surface such as reinforced turf. And it will not be used every day. Has to be delineated so the fire engines know where they are, but it will not be used every day.
okay. So last and foremost, I just mainly want to introduce myself and to let you know the impact also of the wildlife and all that. It's been beautiful there all up to this time. You're talking since '68. And between the Barolotti issues and now, obviously, we've always had motorcycle issues. So then all of a sudden, this became a real shock. So I just want to try to understand everything so that, I like that everybody hears our comments. And it's really important to me.
So, can I say something, Mike?
Yes, go ahead.
So just to clarify, I think that the emergency access is from this road and you just go around, am I mistaken? It's not the intent that you would come up the power lines to get to this, is it?
No, come down the power line. We can't go anyplace else, just on our own lane.
Right. I think she was understanding
Be
that
going
you would
by
be
her
coming through
house.
Pitch Pine
No.
to get through there.
The only way that we can improve, we can build an emergency access here, and we can, if this needs to be fixed, we could fix it. But we can't go that way. Perhaps the brush breaker could, but most emergency equipment's going to go, like, the intent was to go this way.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
All right, I'll be following along. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, this is a preliminary plan. They're going to be back one more time. And then we do a definitive plan, and there'll be another chance to comment on
I
it. So,
have one more thing.
go ahead.
So, Mr. McGrath, on the grid plan, which we're using to determine the number of units, do we need to make allowances for the power line? should there be a reduction of lots there?
I will have to respond in writing because I don't seem to have one.
Okay.
You had a slide of the,
Yeah, all
I
right.
think you did, you had a slide of the grid
Slide.
right there,
It doesn't show,
yeah.
does it show the power line easement?
The power line is right in here. So I guess the board is wondering is, did I subtract the area that's subject to the easement from those two lots? I'll have to get back to you in writing. I
Okay.
can't read that.
Okay.
Okay.
But if I have to reduce it, I'll reduce, obviously, we have to make it conform to the bylaw.
Okay. One more lady.
Sure.
My question also, after speaking to many people that are in the area, I think one of the other huge impacts is the foundation, you know, like, are they gonna have a big backyard and how the property's, the building's gonna be closer to their new road, or are they gonna be pushed back? You know, that makes a huge difference too, just how you're situated on the lot, and that hasn't yet been determined, right?
Right.
Right.
Which we don't really do. We do the subdivision of the land.
Oh,
We do the plan.
okay.
The rest of it is like building code and other things driven. We don't get involved in that.
All righty.
Oh, good, we do.
Comment?
Actually, you do. Yeah.
But
So
the-
you won't get into the building code level details, but you'll get into, because it's a quadplex,
Oh, the quadplex. Oh, we're
Building
doing
placement.
4.
right, you'll have a design review.
Okay.
Remember, I've done some work that you haven't seen, and the bottom line is that there's I have to have parking for the units, and they're in the front yards, and then the back yards, and sometimes the side yards have the septic. There's a minimum 20-foot setback in the planned residential development for multifamily dwellings. So earlier it was discussed to be 10 feet, but it's actually 20 feet.
20 feet, so
So the bottom line is that
so
there.
you've got a 70-foot setback.
So the bottom line is that the work, there is still space around the outside of the buildings that is inside these lots. So, in my long experience, I've done 70 subdivisions, and I think 40 or 50 of them are cluster, and cluster's the way to go. It just is, and it's for so many reasons. So,
One more question. Were you considering a small shared septic for the project?
The
When you
way that it actually works is that it's very difficult in Massachusetts to propose shared systems. You have to apply for variance of Title V. So in order to get a variance of Title V, you have to prove you have a hardship. So I do not know why Massachusetts is, well, I do know, never mind. Massachusetts is too rigid as far as I'm concerned, and they don't readily approve shared systems.
And even if they're denitrifying, does that make it any different?
Makes no difference in Massachusetts.
Do you still have plans to use denitrifying systems? My
opinion is this is so far away from the coastal estuaries that we don't need to worry about the nitrogen from here.
Even though the,
We can go round and round. I invite the planning board to take a drive. Start out at Brick Hill Road, go up Sandwich Road, take the 9th left. That's Pinecrest Beach Drive. Then, as you drive through Pinecrest Beach Drive, turn your head as you go by every house. House, 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 house. Drive all the way around Pinecrest Beach Drive. You're going to go quite a ways. It might be 1.75 miles. All houses, they're on 7,500 square foot lots. You're going to come to an opening on the left. It's all vegetated. And then you're going to see an entrance that says Mayor's Pond Well. Don't drive down there, but come back and look at the recharge area. The recharge area for that well goes right up through Pinecrest Beach. The total nitrogen in that well is 1.5 milligrams per liter. And if you look at the density of those houses, I have suggested several times to certain entities about nitrogen loading that they need to calibrate their models with actual nitrogen readings, not 1984 science. And if they did so, we would recognize this attenuation and we'd be fixing the estuaries.
But-
I think you've heard this before.
But well, we don't know which way the water's flowing, other than it would likely seem to me here it would flow toward the Coonamessett watershed, right?
That's true, but there is a study by MBL that in 600 feet, the nitrogen dropped from attenuated down below 3 milligrams per liter, which is the accepted threshold for the groundwater draining into an estuary. So we have, 15 harbors? And I think we have 9 estuaries that are stressed. And we've spent $40 million on the one that needs to be sewered, but we don't have enough money to build. The last quote I heard from south of 28, never mind West Falmouth or any of the west-facing shores, was $400 million. And then the key there is there's no place to put the nitrogen. So we need to start using realistic numbers. I filed a report with DEP that says my residential RUCs, the average total nitrogen was 80 milligrams per liter. Their model says it's 50. So what that means is, and I have 3 houses that are in West Falmouth Harbor's recharge area, and we measure 80. So that means that they have 160% more nitrogen coming out of every house than what's in the quote-unquote accepted models. And when I did Little Pond Landing, I found that the Falmouth Trade Center has got 194% more nitrogen than assumed in the models. So there's also, I've testified before town meeting, that there's a commercial system somewhere between the school administration building and the Starbucks, and I measured the total nitrogen to be 186 parts per million. So the assumption in 1984 that all nitrogen was 50 milligrams per liter is a complete assumption.
But still, we need to do all we can, right?
Ralph, you had another
Yes.
question?
Yes. Mr. McGrath, if we were to do a site visit of this property, what would you recommend and how we would get in there?
Well, it's all overgrown, so there is a trail, but it's been several months since.
Where is the trail?
There's, if you look at your town website, they show an area here
I'm
that's
looking
like.
at this right here, that you gave us.
There is a trail that comes back here, so I'd have to go out and make sure it was suitable to walk.
It's a walking
when you
trail. Wait, Mr. McGrath, excuse me, but where do we get on the trail and how far in does it go and that kind of thing? I mean, can you be more specific, please?
It's been several months since I've been there, and I've learned to be careful. But there's a house here, the driver goes around, you could park in here, and then, I don't know exactly where the trail is, I don't remember, but there's a trail that goes back out in here.
But you'll be staking the whole thing, right? So we can do a site.
At the time that we would file a definitive, there'd be a stake every, I think it's 50 feet all the way out to inside of there.
So we'll wait.
Yeah, so we'll be able to find it when it's staked, right?
No, that'll be.
All 4 corners, we'll be able to walk around?
Your regulations say that you have to be able to walk up and
Right.
down that.
Right. That'll be done when you're the next phase. Anybody else? Go ahead. Last time, 3 times tonight. Cut it off there.
Side. Where's the pointer? On the side. The trail, the power lines, what not shown here is Tanglewood. Tanglewood comes in right about there, and the power lines cross right over Tanglewood Drive. There is the power line right-of-way right here at the corner of this lot. There's a fence behind it, but that is the way that people can squeeze around that fence, and that is a trail right to the power lines. You can walk the whole power lines if you can just access it, and there's a place to park. So if you know, it's right there.
Well, we're going to wait till we...
Yeah, we'll wait till you have it
Okay.
staked, and that's
So-
not on this parcel either.
So,
So that's not part of our discussion tonight.
okay. Question, is it within the jurisdiction of the planning board to control how much clear cutting is done outside the 6 indicated lots in the parcel that's colored green? Will that be controlled at all before the construction is started? Can I assume that it won't be clear cut?
Would you like to address that, Mr. McGrath?
And then I have one more comment.
The Falmouth zoning bylaw requires that the developer establish a homeowners association, and there will be covenants that describe that this is to be left basically wooded. There can be recreational uses, but you have to approve them. And the other option we could do is we could convey it to some entity subject to a conservation restriction. But every project I've worked on so far, the open space has been owned by the homeowners association.
Are there,
Go ahead.
are there standard procedures? Would you say typically it's just left completely natural? Or do they sometimes remove the dead brush? Do you have any kind of idea what the typical?
From a practical point of view, there was one developer, and they always would go, I don't know, 10 or 20 feet in and selectively clear the base, but that's the only one I can think of that's ever done any real clearing in an open space.
I think we've hit this one pretty hard tonight.
Yeah.
I think
And this is a
we'll be
preliminary,
back again.
so.
Okay, so we'll have other shots at it. I think, thank you, everybody, for their comments. This is still preliminary. We're going to have one more meeting, and then we get to the real plan. So I think we've covered it pretty well. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda, Woods Hole Group presentation, predictive analysis.
Corey, can you give him that, please?
The heat and the air conditioning on at the same time.
I think schizophrenic.
Thank you. Nobody's interested in this part.
We should have the people on this one first, then we'll have to watch.
Yeah.
Did you stay around last night for the presentation about the senior center?
Yeah. Stay till 10 o'clock.
Good evening. My name is Bob Hamilton. I'm a civil and coastal engineer and the president of the Woods Hole Group. I appreciate the chance to speak with you this evening. I just have a little bit of information to share about a project that's going on at the state level that will eventually produce some information that probably will be beneficial for your planning efforts. So I have a couple of slides here tonight. Going to keep it at a modest amount of time. Certainly welcome any questions that you may have. My colleague, Kirk Bosma, who is the technical lead on this work at Woods Hole Group, would be happy to come back sometime if you want more about the technical basis for the work and the findings, and maybe that's something that would develop as time goes on. But really what I wanted to do this evening is share some preliminary information that you may find of interest. So if there's one thing that you want to take away from this, it would just be this one slide, and I could stop after that, but I have a little bit of information beyond that if you want. So basically, there's a big project going on that Mass DOT is running, and we are a partner on, along with UMass, along with UNH, and some others. It's a collaborative effort. And it's a study that started focused on the central artery area. Mass DOT was concerned about the future flood risk and inundation risk to the highway infrastructure. So together with UMass, we went and, with Mass DOT, pursued grant money from the Federal Highway Administration. And Mass DOT was one of the, I think it was 7 projects or so around the country that was selected to essentially enhance the technical capability that's being applied to look at future risks of inundation to infrastructure. So the point of this whole thing is that there are roads within proximity to the coast that have present-day risk of flooding during high tides, during storms, storm surge, and then it's recognized that that level of risk has a high likelihood of increasing in the future as sea level rises. There's also evidence of increasing frequency and severity of storms. So the purpose of this pilot project that Mass DOT is doing with the Federal Highway money is to apply some state-of-the-art tools to simulate the actual risk that may exist for transportation infrastructure near the coast today and in the future. That work has been completed for Boston proper. I'll show you a couple examples of that. And based on some of the successes that were experienced with that work, that project has now been scaled statewide, and it's underway now. So, as you could imagine, in addition to understanding the risk to the transportation infrastructure that's near the coast, it also produces information about coastal risk in general. So, from a planning perspective for a town of Falmouth, the main gist of my point of being here is that there is in the works, and within a year or so from today, information will be available for Falmouth specifically that provides highly detailed maps of present day and future risk of inundation and flooding. The work's been peer-reviewed by a number of groups. As I said, it's being extended to the entire coastline of Massachusetts, and many communities are jumping on board. Communities are encouraged to use these results, so it's public data, right? It's publicly funded federal money, state money with public universities. So communities have been encouraged to be aware of and to try to leverage the results that are coming out of these studies. So we've worked with a number of communities. I listed a few there. Massport's using the information to help plan their infrastructure. The National Wildlife Federation is using it. And as I mentioned, within about a year or so, the information will make its way down to the Falmouth area. So I just have is it okay if we spend a couple minutes looking at some examples?
Yeah, we're really interested. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a question before you go forward?
Sure.
Is there any way to accelerate the Falmouth aspect of it?
But we'll take that under advisement. I should say,
Motion, we vote right
there is information available today for the general region, but what I'm going to show you, you'll realize the level of detail that is available takes a long time. So it's going to be about a year or so before Falmouth is available. Falmouth is not last.
Do it alphabetically.
Let's see, what am I doing here? Just press that button, maybe.
That's the pointer. Corey?
Jump right there.
Battery must be going in it. I got my TV.
Just push the page down for you.
Pointed at that thing.
It doesn't appear we have such a crowd, we need an extensive
But you need to go to the microphone again because people at home won't hear you. That's really for at home, not for this room here.
So, one question is why do this, right? Isn't there a lot of information available about flooding in the coast, right? We have FEMA maps. We know that NOAA's doing work with what people commonly call bathtub models, where you take the predictions of sea level rise and you intersect that with the highly detailed information that exists about the coast these days. So, and people do evacuation route planning, right? So the question is, why do you need some high-tech, modeling study if all these other things exist? And the answer...
I get it for you. Yes.
Oh, great. So the answer is that the results are drastically different. So I might ask you to go back and forth a couple times on that. It's the only time on this one. So here you see all this is for Boston proper area. You see all this yellow area that theoretically, according to some studies, would be 12 and a half feet deep during a severe storm. But if you go, I may ask you to toggle back and forth just a couple of times on this one only.
So could you just explain a little bit? The darker
Sure.
green is
Yep,
deeper
so
water.
the color map would be, this is during a severe storm.
Yeah.
And the color map represents how deep might the water be during this severe storm. So in this case, it's a 1% chance annual occurrence storm or a 100-year storm. So a significant portion of the Boston area would potentially
I see, so
flood.
this is typically there's not water in this area, but you're showing where the water is inundated.
This is bad situation, that's right. So,
Maximum floodplain.
right. So, but reality is, some of the yellow is now blue, okay? So there are dams that stop this flow of water. There are pumps that actually pump the water out in areas that flood. There are waves that propagate into certain areas. There are winds that force water into certain areas. So there's lots of dynamic factors that affect the actual flooding that occurs, much differently than a simplified approximation that may be represented by a FEMA model or a simple bathtub model, as we refer to. So the only point here is that we've shown that the calculations by this method differ substantially from some of the simplified methods. And as you'll see in an example I'll show it, it affects planning decisions at a fairly local level. You mind advancing that?
Is that bar on the left, is that 11.5 feet or is it 115 feet?
There's a decimal in there, so 11.5.
Okay, you can't see the decimal here,
Right.
so, okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
One more, please. Other way? One more? Great. Okay, so what do we do? This is where the long story could come, but I'm going to keep things pretty simple. So in order to produce these calculations, and the Mass DOT effort that we're working on requires actually that you simulate, that on the top left there, that's actually the United States, and then the yellow is the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast. So this starts with a calculation that includes the ocean, essentially the North Atlantic Ocean as a whole. And then on the right, you see all those lines, the spaghetti, yellow, orange, blue lines. Those are all storm tracks. So in this case, the hurricanes. So what we do is we simulate the entire coast, and then we simulate actually thousands of storms. So it's great that computers are really strong these days, right? So you can simulate all these storms, and these storms are based on what has occurred historically, but we also worked with a fellow at MIT to extrapolate what those storms might look like in the future, given the trends of frequency and severity of storms. So you simulate lots of storms for the entire coast, and then you repeat those simulations for different sea level rise scenarios. And as you probably heard, there are wide-ranging forecasts of sea level rise. In some cases, maybe it's not going to rise that much. In some cases, maybe it's going to rise a lot. So what we decided to do with the UMass, UNH, Mass DOT team is simulate it for a bunch of different cases, and then turn that into, I'm an engineer, right? So you want an answer you could actually do something with. So we turn that into some probability of occurrence that somebody could make a planning level decision on. So we do all that complex work. And then you output the results at thousands and thousands of places. Okay, so this is an aerial shot. That's Boston Harbor underneath, and then that mesh, those white lines. So basically everywhere those white lines intersect, you get a result out for every one of those storms for all those different sea level rise scenarios. And I think you can go one more there, maybe.
Computer's really working.
Yeah. So now we're really kind of zooming into detail. You may recognize a place you've been for some good food there. But now you can start to see where all those lines intersect. So the model outputs information not only on the water, but also up on the land. So it's an incredible amount of detail that's coming out of this tool. And then when you output the information from the land, you can now start to make neighborhood level, parcel level, street level decisions about what your future risk may be. Now, I'm the first one to say that any single one of these simulations, you got to be careful buying into something, 100 years from now, one simulation. But when you do it in this method, you have the thousands of simulations and you put statistics on it, it starts to provide a basis that's useful for decision making today. One more, please. Okay, so here's an example of an output, and this is the type of thing that might be available for Falmouth. So this is in the approach area coming up Route 93 into Boston. There's an area, that's the golf course you might recognize on the right, it's kind of a hillside. There's an area that Mass DOT, this is an example of how they're using it. There's an area that Mass DOT was thinking about using to build a new maintenance facility. And they wanted to know what the risk is, today and into the future. So, okay, so this is a map. Here's a roadway. This is a map where the colors, in this case, show what's the chance that an area might be flooded. So this shows that in the present day, there's about, I don't know, maybe 1 to 5% chance that this particular area that they're interested in might see some water. Okay, how's that helpful? Big deal. But if you go one step farther, then you can see, well, okay, it might be flooded, but how worried about that am I? How deep might it be? So in this case, it shows, well, it's really a half a foot or less, and it's going to occur at a low probability, and you can still access the area. And if you go one more, it shows that, when that storm occurs, it might be wet for some number of hours. So you might have some confidence putting something there that, there's a small risk of a limited chance of being flooded occasionally. But then if you go one step further, if we extrapolate that into the future and start looking at inundation risks, then you start talking about percentages on the order of 20%, and then if you hit it again, thank you.
How far out is that?
This is out, that's out 25 years. And then you start talking about water depths that exceed a foot. And then if you go again. And then the point is that now you have flooding pathways from 2 different directions and you can't access the site anymore. So based on this type of information, on a certain planning level of performance, so this is the 1% inundation depth. So still a low chance, it's a 100-year type storm capacity, but it shows that in a period of time, it's put that on this parcel level, that they would change their planning decision about not putting a key maintenance facility there that you wouldn't be able to access during certain severe events.
Bob,
Yep.
what's the elevation of that site above sea level at this point?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can get back to you on that, but that's basically, that's the math that's being done here. It takes digital terrain models of the land and compares it to the overland flow. So it's these types of, the reason I show you this example, it's these types of maps that will exist for Falmouth.
And I know that when people talk about 100-year events, they kind of scoff at it. Well, what's 100 years from now? But yet, in some parts of the country, they've had 2 500-year events within the past 10 years. So this isn't that far out.
Right, and what's hard to grasp with this is you're exactly right, and that there's a 100-year event that could occur this year, which basically is the event that has a 1% chance of occurring this year, right? There's also, well, what's the 1% chance of occurrence event 100 years from now when sea level may be different? And this tool will provide you information on both of those scenarios. And the thing that we're working on with MIT is that, to your point, is that statistics are showing that what was considered a 1% chance of annual occurrence storm 50 years ago is different than today, which means it would be different 50 years from now. So we're incorporating those statistics into this analysis.
And just thinking about it myself, and you think about even small increments of sea level rise, that's a lot of gallons of water.
Yes.
And the damage that can do when it's wind-driven, and then on top of another event. Is that a consideration too, is just the amount of extra water that is moved by these events?
It is. This doesn't address, this accounts for the fact that there is more water, or expanding water, as the case may be, and there's more flooding. The actual damage caused by the moving water would be a different application, but you can do that as well. Do you mind advancing that? So one of the things that this model does as well, you start to see arrows moving, is this model also shows you the pathway for the flooding that may or may not occur. If you hit the arrow again, I don't know if you can see those arrows kind of developing.
Oh, yeah. Right.
This is really for presentation purposes. But one of the things that we found is, so what? You know, what do you do with this information? Well, what we've found in many communities is that as we look forward into the future, when more severe events may occur, there may be a higher water surface, large areas start to flood, but generally the water is sourced from relatively local places. And to me, that's one of the most useful applications of this information, because a lot of the maps that have been produced recently that just show these vast areas of flooding, I don't think communities have any idea what to do with that information, right? So if somebody tells you, hey, there's a 1% chance that half your community is going to be flooded 100 years from now, I don't know what you do about that, right? You don't possibly have enough money to do something about it, and also you don't know if it's going to happen, right? So that means you're going to do nothing today. So what this analysis is showing for many applications is that there's certain isolated areas that if there's going to be an increased risk, it's going to come from those areas. And you can actually plan for that. And you don't have to build something today that protects you 100 years from now, but you can start to identify those areas and make sure you have the flexibility to do something in those areas. And you can also design solutions that are what we say modular and adaptable. So you can do something in the short term that helps protect you against today's risk, but do it in a way with an engineering design that's scalable in the future if monitoring, which is going to continue to go on, if the monitoring shows that the risk is actually increasing at the rate people think it is. So again, just from a planning perspective, I think the information is helpful.
What are some of the things we can do to mitigate the risk? What can we do about it?
That's a big question. Long answer, but I'll give you the short answer. There are traditional engineering solutions, right? So if you think you have a vulnerable point of flooding today or in the future, there are traditional coastal engineering, seawalls and things like that. One of the things that we've been working with a lot is more of what we call the green infrastructure, or the natural solutions and living shorelines. As more flooding occurs, certain wetlands have the opportunity to expand. Those wetlands have the opportunity to accommodate waters that might take the pressure off the developed areas. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but
No, you are.
the short answer is some hard engineering combined with appropriate planning with green infrastructure to accommodate what you know is going to be increased floodwaters.
Well, that coincides with what we learned. I'm one of the co-authors of the comprehensive plan, and when we did our coastal resiliency element, and we interviewed people from conservation, and that was one of the action items is to enhance our natural ecosystem to absorb storm impacts, and so that is right in line with what you're saying.
And one of the action items was to hire a design professional to start working on that for us too, as well. And this town meeting approved that a couple of years ago. We really haven't done anything on it yet.
Could you advance, please? Thank you. Or a couple more we'll move by. So the point is that this type of information will be available for Falmouth that not only shows areas at risk, but also the pathways that the floodwaters may come, which would be areas you could focus your efforts on. In other words, if you find that there's a particular pathway that seems like it's going to flood a big part of town, you probably wouldn't necessarily choose that parcel as the site of the next power utility or water treatment.
West now, too.
Okay, this is just as a side point. Other applications of this information to your question is not only what areas are at risk, but how might these ecosystems evolve? So if more areas are flooded and there's more water, we'll have conversion of tidal flats to open water and low marsh to high marsh. And one of the things that this information is being used for, and it's a CZM study, Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management Office, we've been working with them. That also exists statewide, and there's information available for Falmouth, which you may be interested in. This is a map where the colors on the compare to the key on the top right, and there's different types of vegetation resources that map to colors. So the brown is a tidal flat, the blue is an open water, the green is a certain type of wetland, and this is in, call it sort of like today, that's when the maps were available in 2011. This is up in the Great Marsh in Newburyport.
Oh, yeah.
But if you advance and you move forward to 2030, you start to see expanding wetlands. If you move into the 2050 time frame, you start to see expanded wetlands, but also a conversion of some low marsh to high marsh, more inundation of tidal flats, and then one more extrapolates it into the future. And like I said, this information exists around the state as well now. The maps have been published. They're going to be published soon. And one of the things we found that this is particularly useful for is some wetlands in areas like this have the opportunity to expand naturally.
Yep.
Other wetlands don't necessarily because they're constrained by some infrastructure or development or roadway. And one of the things CZM is doing is they're trying to find those wetlands that have that opportunity to expand naturally and make sure that they control some of the development around those wetlands so that there is the ability to accommodate future stormwaters. And this information exists for Falmouth as well.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that area. And it's very similar to what we have here on the south coast of Falmouth. There's a lot of estuaries and bays and things like that. So would you say that this would be applicable to Falmouth's bays and estuaries?
Yes, and these maps actually will exist for Falmouth. They exist for Falmouth now. They're in the process of final publishing.
Okay.
But there's a GIS site that'll be set up through CZM that we worked with them to set up. And those maps you could go download and you could actually get the future vegetation layers off of the CZM site and put it into the town GIS.
So that was my question, that this will be able to incorporate into our GIS that we have right now.
Yep.
And it'll be open to everybody to look at.
Right.
Because I use that all the time.
Yep.
Bob, who's the contact point CEM for this study?
You can contact me directly, but Bruce Carlisle is the director.
Bruce Carlisle?
Yep. And he's a good source of information. There's also Mark Carullo, M-A-R-C, I think C-A-R-U-L-L-O-O, Carullo, at CZM for the vegetation work. And then this is different than the Mass, I wanted to share a couple things. The Mass DOT work with looking at the detailed flooding, there's a fellow named Steve Smith at Mass DOT who's running the show there. We're just about done. There may be a couple more. So you asked what can you do, right? So the point is now you have all this information in hand. Hopefully it's more useful information than may have been available previously. Like I said, now you can look at a particular place and understand the probability of risk of flooding, and then, is it more like a half a foot or more like a couple of feet? That type of information helps you make decisions of where it might be appropriate to have a hospital, whereas it might be appropriate to have a beach parking lot, right? Certainly a different risk profile for those things. So there's different types of engineering solutions, typical gray infrastructure, wetlands restoration, different types of soft solutions that can be implemented, and you can select them appropriately based on the risk level. I think that's a nice rendering of a beach nourishment. Maybe if you hit that one more time. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So
Use
natural
some of that.
Yeah.
living solutions.
Yeah.
And that might be it.
Yeah.
Oh, one other point, that as these wetlands are, as the wetlands are flooding, one of the things that's been done more recently is taking dredge material and clean material and broadcasting that in thin layers onto wetland areas, so that a lot of wetlands don't have enough sediment coming in to keep up with the rising sea level. So reuse of dredge material
It helps them grow up,
allows the wetlands to keep
like
up
filling a
with it.
cranberry bog with sand.
Right. And that's more of a natural buffer to stormwater. That website, which is long, is where you can go to the DOT site, and they have all the details about the program. And then just put phone numbers up for myself and Kirk if there's information.
Should we capture this? Can this be sent to us?
The presentation?
Yeah,
Sure, we can copy it now.
I'd like to have it. That way we don't have to get everything.
Yeah.
Yes, Paul?
Some months, following Sandy in New York, New Jersey area, someone had a competition, I understand it, showing an area of Staten Island having some very, what's your thoughts on that?
I am familiar with that competition. I don't know all the details of it. We did not enter that competition. I know the result, it certainly produced a lot of creativity, right? One of the things that came out of it was, I think, a large vision for a living shoreline kind of a concept. Fundamentally larger breakwaters, but the breakwaters themselves are habitat, and then for fisheries, and then surrounding the breakwaters is an opportunity to restore on the lee side marshes and beaches. That was one of the winning entries. I think had some solutions like that. There was also a design competition for Morrissey Boulevard in Boston a couple of years ago. People had visions of, people were starting to think, well, in the future, maybe we just need to live with water better, right? So where maybe we need to think about having, areas to get back and forth by small boats and things like that. So, I guess to answer your question, I think it's useful to generate a lot of creativity. The solutions that come out of those design challenges are certainly expensive, so the extent to which they can be implemented remains to be seen. That's why I like these sort of smaller, using the information to identify these local areas. You can do something to make a difference at a small scale, but affect a larger area.
Well, Corey and I were talking today about, instead of putting houses on stilts, just put a barge on the ground and 2 pilings with the rings around them, so when the tide comes up, you just float up in the pilings.
What do you do with the connections to utilities?
Well, they're flexible.
Flex pipes.
Umbilical cord.
Yeah. Or you just disconnect
Stick
it.
to planning.
One of the things we found is that in doing this, in most cases, today's risk is greater than people generally perceive. So in some ways, we've been lucky, fortunate, that some generations have gone without major storms, like a 54 hurricane or something like that. So people tend to underestimate today's risk.
I like to remind people that Sandy wasn't a hurricane when it made landfall. It was a cyclone. Downgraded to less than a Cat 1. And it's what it did offshore that produced a lot of the damage.
Right. And we were
The
particularly...
Hurricane of '38, the Falmouth fishing fleet was up at the Dairy Queen.
Right. And we were lucky, even during Sandy, which was not an extreme storm in Boston, it happened to occur at a lower tide.
Yeah.
Had it occurred just by chance, 5 hours later.
Well, I have a video of, I think it was Ivan at Green Pond, and there was maybe 6 inches under the bridge of clear space. And normally, you can get a center console boat with a T-top under there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of water in Green Pond.
I have a question. Are you familiar with any of these living reefs that are actually being implemented now, or just on paper?
There are a number being implemented, in large part in the Mid-Atlantic and the Gulf Coast. Some on a fairly large scale. They tend to be hybrid-type solutions, so they may restore a barrier beach, maybe put a core of rock in the barrier beach, so there's a resilient structure in the case that the barrier is eroded. And then in the lee side, they'll pump dredge material in and surround it with geotubes and have that dredge material form a wetland, so they'll plant the wetland, and then they'll put oyster reef type substrate on the perimeter of the wetland. So a lot of that is happening. Chesapeake Bay, a lot in Texas, Louisiana coast. So there's some pretty good examples coming together on a relatively large scale. Those areas don't have necessarily the development pressure and history that we do, and many times they don't have the same rigor of environmental, controls that we do. But I think there are a lot of opportunities for some of these living shorelines, particularly in some of our waterways. They're tough on the open exposed coast, where it's hard to stop that really, severe energy. But in some of the waterways, there's more eroding banks in some of the protected waterways than people realize. And I think those areas have the opportunity to stabilize a bank, establish a beach, establish a marsh, maybe a little oyster reef. The main challenge is that in doing so, you're then occupying tidal waters. It's with habitat, but you're occupying tidal waters, and those are protected and valued areas.
So given that, your statement that it's hard to use those in the really high-velocity areas, would you be skeptical about the Staten Island plan that you say you've noticed? Because their situation is the South Coast facing sort of similar to ours. And I was imagining it seemed like maybe we could benefit from a reef, maybe like from Nobska out towards near Falmouth Harbor, just to protect that surf drive because it's so vulnerable.
Our sewer lines and Falmouth Road Race and everything are right in the middle of all that. And that's, and our town is really decided by our access that we have. Falmouth is one of the only towns you can drive the whole shoreline, and the public has access to see it. And we'd like to see that continue, because that's what our town is.
To answer your question, what I know about that design challenge, I wouldn't necessarily be skeptical, because the renderings or the vision is very large scale, right? So as much as we want to say it's a living shoreline, it is, but the core of it is a big giant rock breakwater, right? So in that case, there's engineering resilience combined with environmental habitat restoration. I think what happens is, a lot of times on open eroding coasts, people feel forced into trying something that doesn't have necessarily the robustness it needs to provide the erosion protection. And then that's when you see some of the failures.
Right.
Well, I grew up in Winthrop that has breakwaters off of Shore Drive. Yeah, when you'd get water, they would run down the streets, but people, first floors, even during the no-name storm or any of the hurricanes or blizzard of '78, they weren't flooded out like places in Beachmont. So I'm a believer in, I like the living reef aspect because it's in the water. It isn't a pile of rocks sticking above the horizon. But you know, I'm just a believer in a barrier, a natural barrier.
When you talk, another question, when you talk about a mix of natural use and some engineering to protect infrastructure, have you implemented any of those practical engineering infrastructure items, like to protect a roadway? I understand when we redid the Mara Vista Bridge, it was a rebuild, but they incorporated some plastic sheet piles there, and in that small area that they were able to use to rebuild that roadway leading up to the bridge, the road really holds up well there, and the sheet piles, they seem very unobtrusive, and I just wonder if that might be something we might incorporate on Surf Drive. Have you any familiarity with that?
I know the area you're talking about. I'm not familiar with the sheet pile solution there.
Yeah, you'd hardly notice it. There's a wood cap on it, and it leads up to, as you're traveling from Bristol Beach towards East Falmouth, before you come up to the bridge on the right-hand side there. It's not very noticeable.
It's only on the west side of the breach, though. The east side of the
Correct.
breach doesn't have it.
The
and
east
that's-
side still has all that concrete.
Right.
I watched it get built, so I watched it happen. Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
One of the things we've talked about numerous times in town meeting and elsewhere is a continued beach nourishment program for Falmouth, particularly on the south coast. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. I think reality is that we've...
Put a budget item in every year and keep doing it. They do it in New Jersey and elsewhere.
Sure, so that can be done on a lot of different scales. You know, on the smallest scale, and I think we did work with the town, there is a comprehensive permit that allows for dredge material to be used at different places as long as it's clean and beach compatible. I think recycling the sediment that you have is key. You just got to do that as much as you can. Reality is, though, that unless we start dredging a whole lot more, there's more eroding from the beaches than the dredging produces. So there's going to be, if we're going to maintain natural beaches in the places they are now, there's going to be a future need for more sand on beaches. One thing I would mention is the state CZM has been proactive in recent years in trying to look at novel solutions. And Sandwich is working on the idea of using a nearshore sediment and borrow site that's not just dredging for the purposes of navigation, but also dredging for the purposes of providing sand for shore protection. And that project is intended to be a pilot, not only to help that region, but also something that might be replicated elsewhere. So we should keep an eye on that.
I understand they
All
just
set?
did a lot of nourishment there, and they lost a lot of sand, but, you know, that's the nature of nature. But what if they didn't have the sand to lose?
Right.
What would they have lost then?
Yes, that was my point at the selectmen's meeting.
And not to belabor it, we've been here for a little while, but the Sandwich project has a design for a beach that would be resilient to storms. It has a dune, the design plans have a dune, and they have a beach berm, and then an appropriate slope to absorb storm waves up to, I think, a 10-year storm or more. They just haven't been able to build that design yet. So what they did recently, they took full advantage of the clean material that came out of the canal, but it wasn't enough to actually build the whole design out. So part of the reason they want the offshore borrow site is to have enough sand to actually build that beach that has an engineering standard to it.
Well, this has been great. It's really provocative, a lot of interest. I'd be anxious to see, as soon as we can start seeing some of these models, we can actually look at ourselves. You think it's going to be available within the next year?
Yep, the inundation model within a year, the CZM wetland maps within, should be a couple of months. In fact, I can make a point when that's available to get it to you.
Yeah, we have you come back, yeah.
That'd be great.
That's what we'd like you to have come back as soon as
Okay.
it is available.
Great.
Thank you for
I'd
your
like to
time.
know when it's available, the timeframe where we can actually see it ourselves on the Falmouth GIS, when it can be incorporated into that.
Sure.
So our local architects and planners and engineers could use it on our own maps that we see on our scale. It's nice to see downtown Boston, but I'd rather
Right.
be looking at Surf Drive Beach or
Yes.
Spring Bars Road or
It's
something
just
like
a
that.
heads up that this is coming, so whatever planning you're doing now, count on the fact there'll be some details coming later.
Yeah.
Good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
Good job.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We have it on the agenda all the time, the accessory apartment bylaw draft. I don't think we have anything new in that. Do you, Brian?
I do know that there are comments, I don't have any comments from the board tonight, but I know there are some on the way from other boards. If you want, I can ask some other members of the housing committees or housing community that they have any suggestions that get them to me. But I have nothing in
I'd like to have them when we're ready to have the joint meeting with the ZBA, that we have, we've had those comments. We're going to have a meeting with them on that issue, aren't we?
I know they're working on these comments at their meeting this Thursday.
Okay. So,
We're just a few days off.
a couple of weeks, we should be able to start planning for a joint meeting with them?
Right now, I'm trying to get together with the Conservation Commission, and then we'll begin together with the Selectmen. And then my understanding was you want to meet with them, then the Board of Appeals.
Okay, so
On this issue.
the order is going to be,
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
yes, thank you very much. The order is going to be
Concom,
Concom, Selectmen, and then ZBA.
correct. Because you wanted to address some of these resiliency issues with the Concom. You wanted this presentation first.
Yeah.
You wanted to do some resiliency issues with the Conservation Commission for your scheduled July meeting with the Selectmen.
Okay, so we'll be gearing up for that.
You'll be gearing up for that.
Okay, that's going to be the target. That'll be the next,
In the meantime, I'll compile the comments from various, stakeholders regards to the accessory apartment bylaw, and hopefully squeeze a meeting in somehow.
okay, yeah, because I think we should have one meeting where we address all those comments just on our
Correct.
board before we
Correct.
carry it forward, so we get more familiar with it.
Get the comments first, and
Yeah.
first step.
Can we
Okay.
just refresh ourselves on that? I think as we left it, on our last discussion, we were leaning towards if the unit was attached or included in the house, it could be by right.
Correct.
And if we were going to consider, say for instance, a garage with an apartment above it detached, it would still be a special permit?
Correct.
That is the way it's
That's where we
written.
left it, right?
It's still written that way, yes.
I'd like to mention that one of the vineyard towns, might be Oak Bluffs, is also wrestling with the accessory apartment bylaw right now. And they seem to be going down all the regulation things that we're trying to get away from. So it might be interesting to take a look at what they're doing as well.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Bob, which town?
One of the towns on the vineyard, it might be Oak Bluffs, it could be Vineyard Haven.
Okay.
It was just at their town meeting. They were discussing that.
Okay.
next, we've already asked, there wasn't any general correspondence, correct? So,
Not general.
not general, we had specific, you told us it's an email, right? And we had the letter requesting, what we've already voted on from McGrath, the extension, we've got that. Future agenda items.
Melinda asked me to send her information on the conservancy bylaw, given that to Corey, so I think she's going to disseminate that to everyone on the board. And when we come time to discuss it, we'll have that information. I think people will have their eyes opened by that because it's a pretty interesting bylaw.
Okay, this is what you're referenced in Chatham, is correct?
Yes.
Okay. That'll be interesting. Anybody else? Next is, next meeting, we're scheduled for May 10th, is that correct, Brian? Correct. And that is the end of the agenda items.
Okay. I move for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Very good.